Hi everyone, I'm Maxine and I'm 30 years old. This post is about my very annoying mother-in-law, Kayla, and how I got back at her. I grew up in a modest family. My mom raised me mostly on her own because my dad was always working. He had a low-paying job and worked hard just to make ends meet. From a young age, I was great at school, which helped me earn a full scholarship to college. I left home, rented an apartment near campus, and shared it with 4 other girls. I worked part-time at a café to cover rent and basic needs. I was determined to get a good job after graduation. I wasn't very attractive, so I didn't get much attention from boys, and I wasn't looking for love. But then Fred came into my life and changed everything. One day, I was working at the café when I was asked to take Fred's order. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" I asked. "No, but you can take my number," he replied. "Yeah, no thanks," I said. "At least give me a chance, Ginger girl," he said. "First of all, sir, my name is Maxine, not Ginger. If that was a joke, it didn't work. Now, may I take your order?" I asked. "1 coffee, please," he said, and then added, "Oh, Maxine, can you draw a little heart on it?" I couldn't help but blush at Fred's comment, though I kept a straight face while serving him. The next day he was back, and soon he became a regular at the café, always insisting I serve him. My coworkers joked that he was my boyfriend, even though I denied it over and over. One day, after a lot of teasing from my coworkers, Fred came in and I was already annoyed. I wanted to prove to them that Fred wasn't my boyfriend, so I went to his table, looking angry, and asked, "What do you want?" "The usual," he said. "No, I mean, what's the deal with you always asking me to serve you and drawing hearts? What's going on?" I demanded. "I want dinner," he said. "We don't start serving until 8, I replied. "No, Ginger, I mean with you," he said, "and the rest is history." The nickname Ginger stuck, and so did Fred. I said yes to that dinner, and things fell into place. We started dating and moved in together. I found out that Fred's dad is a millionaire, and Fred is his only son. He wanted to introduce me to his parents, but I asked him to wait until I had a job. After graduating, I got a job as a sales manager and quickly made a name for myself. I was earning well and felt confident about meeting Fred's parents. When I told Fred I was ready, he warned me that his mom was very protective and not to take anything she said to heart. I thought I could handle it, but I had no idea how toxic Kayla would be. One Sunday morning, we went to meet Fred's parents. We drove up to their huge mansion, which would have amazed little Maxine. It was like a princess fantasy from my childhood. I felt nervous as we walked through the grand hall to the dining room, where Fred's parents were waiting. Kayla and George were sipping wine when we sat down. George poured me some wine before I could decline, and then the conversation took a turn for the worse. "So, my dear, what was your name again?" Kayla asked. "Maxine, ma'am, but you can call me Max," I replied. "Yes, sorry, Maxine. I can hardly remember the names of all the girls my son brings home. You wouldn't believe how many gold diggers are out there throwing themselves at my son," she said. "I believe that might be true, ma'am, but I'm not one of them," I said. "Well, you wouldn't admit it even if you were," she replied. "Mom, that's enough," Fred interrupted. "What is enough? I don't think I've said anything wrong," she said. "Mom, you're insulting me. I'm no gold digger," I said. "I'm one of the top executives at one of the best companies in the country," Kayla said. "So you think you're just a corporate worker who recently got money and my son is your backup plan if your career doesn't work out." "Mom, I've had enough," Fred said. "I need to talk to you alone." Kayla looked offended and left the room, followed by Fred. George, who had been quiet until then, said to me, "I think you're a smart girl, Maxine. I want you to be part of our family. Don't mind my wife, she's just very protective of Fred." I tried to smile, but I was eager to find out what Fred and Kayla were talking about, so I excused myself and stood behind a door where I could hear them but they couldn't see me. "Mom, you need to be nice to Maxine. She has no interest in my money," Fred said. "You think you know better than me," Kayla replied. "I've seen many gold diggers. Just because she used to be poor doesn't mean she is now. When you met Dad, he was a billionaire. Would you have liked it if people judged you the way you're judging Maxine? Fred, don't you dare compare your marriage to your father's with your short relationship with some random girl who was poor. If you can't respect me, then you and that girl need to leave my house right now." She's not just a fling, and yes, we are leaving, Fred said. I heard angry footsteps coming my way, so I quickly went back to the table and pretended to drink my wine. Soon, Fred came in and told me to get my coat because we were leaving. He said we could get food on the way home. I didn't say anything, just nodded. I was on the verge of tears. The drive home was very quiet. Fred was deep in thought, and I was sniffling. I felt hopeless. I'm usually optimistic, but this situation was too much. I didn't know if Fred would have to choose between me and his family, and I really wanted his mom to like me. We stopped for pizza on the way home and had an early dinner. Afterward, I asked Fred if we should stop seeing each other. Fred looked shocked and took my hands, saying, "Maxine, nothing can stop me from seeing you, not even my mom. You can't get rid of me now. This is meant to last." I felt like a little girl who had just received a wonderful gift. Fred was incredibly sweet, and I think he worried I might leave him because of his mom. I had no plans to leave, and I hoped that someday I would win Kayla over. I now realize I was naive back then, but I've learned a lot since then. A few months later, Fred proposed, and I said yes. He suggested we elope, and we did. It was an adventurous and romantic experience. Later, Kayla insisted on a formal wedding because she didn't want to lose face with her friends. I insisted on paying half of the wedding costs, even though Fred wanted to cover everything. The wedding was a beautiful event, but as I walked down the aisle, I wished my father could be there. He had passed away a few years earlier. While walking down the aisle, I suddenly saw Kayla in a long white dress. I felt like running away because I knew she was determined to never accept me and would try to ruin our marriage at every chance. But then I saw Fred's smiling face and went through with the wedding. Throughout the ceremony, Kayla did everything she could to make me feel left out. She wanted family photos without me and made sure Fred and I didn't sit together at the reception. She also talked badly about her so-called friends behind their backs, criticizing their appearance and pretending to be nice in front of them. I was shocked at how two-faced she was. She seemed obsessed with everyone's jewelry, dresses, and looks, and tried to outshine everyone, including me, the bride. I was emotionally drained after the wedding and slept for 12 hours straight. Fred was understanding and supportive, but dealing with Kayla after marriage was exhausting. She constantly criticized my appearance, even pointing out my wrinkles and comparing her youthful skin to mine. I dreaded her visits and tried to stay at work longer to avoid her, but she used that against me too, saying I was neglecting Fred for my own selfish reasons. I tried to explain that I worked hard to save money for our future baby, but it didn't help. Kayla always insisted that we spend holidays with them, and during those times she would tell Fred he had chosen a poor wife who depended on him. She would criticize the gifts I gave her and praise the ones Fred chose, even though I picked them out. The year I got pregnant was especially tough. My hormones were already making me emotional, and Kayla never missed a chance to criticize my body. When Fred confronted her, she would lie, pretend she didn't know, and blame it on my hormones. Spending 5 days with my mother-in-law that year felt impossible. I decided it was time for Kayla to realize how wrong she had been to me. I wanted to address this before the baby was born, because I didn't want him growing up seeing his grandma putting down his mother with shallow comments about her appearance. I didn't want him to develop a shallow mindset like hers. So I took matters into my own hands. I started spending more time at the Pearson mansion, putting up with Kayla's jabs as part of my plan for revenge. I pretended it was because I wanted our child to have a strong bond with his grandparents. During this time, George was very kind to me, bringing me fruits and chocolates, and he would often organize parties for the kids on the days I visited. Kayla used these parties as excuses to avoid sitting with me. Kayla would loudly complain about me to her friends, calling me the worst. But whenever any of them went to the bathroom or left early, she would criticize them too. I used this to my advantage. I made a note of their names and the nasty things she said about them. I even recorded some of her comments with a small recorder. I'd also snooped around the mansion, and one day I found myself in her private room. I discovered something interesting while snooping around. Kayla had records of her visits to a famous plastic surgeon. She had had Botox done several times, which explained her youthful appearance. I don't have anything against people who choose plastic surgery, but I was against how Kayla hid her treatments while criticizing others who aged naturally, including me for my wrinkles. I documented everything carefully, preparing for my doomsday moment. That year, I decided to give Kayla a parrot for Christmas, a smart and intelligent bird that could mimic sounds and learn quickly. On Christmas Day, Fred and I took the parrot to the Pearson mansion for the Christmas dinner. Kayla had insisted on having a baby shower for me on Christmas. When we arrived, all of Kayla's friends were already there, and George was nowhere to be found, so Fred went to look for him. It was just me, Kayla, and her friends. They exchanged knowing looks and laughed at some inside joke. They started bringing out their gifts for me and making snide remarks. Kayla and her friends were discussing how I should be a stay-at-home mom and what I should use on my face to prevent wrinkles. Then it was time for me to give Kayla the special gift I had brought. I handed her the parrot, and everyone seemed impressed at first. But then something unexpected happened. The parrot started talking. It repeated Kayla's comments about her friends and made fun of their appearance. It said things like, "Did you see Linda's stomach in that dress? It's ugly, and Jenny's dress is horrible." Kayla tried to catch the bird, but it flew up to a high cupboard and continued repeating her comments. It even said things like, "Kayla gets Botox and is ashamed of aging, and Kayla is a liar and two-faced." Kayla was upset and demanded I take the parrot away, but I told her the parrot was just mimicking what it had heard. I suggested she might want to start seeing the good in others instead. I looked around and everyone was shocked. Their faces were red, and one by one, they grabbed their coats, slammed the door, and left. Kayla sat on the couch with her head in her hands. Then she looked up and said, "You did this. You ruined my image, my reputation, everything. How will this ever be fixed?" I told her, "It's not me who ruined your image. If you can't face people now, that's your own fault. Fix yourself, and things will get better." Kayla yelled back, "Don't lecture me. You're after Fred's money, aren't you? I'll make sure you don't get a penny." The parrot continued to mimic her comments, saying, "Kayla is a gold digger. Kayla is a hypocrite." Fred walked in, saw the commotion, and put the bird back in its cage. Kayla immediately complained, "Fred, your wife did this. Tell her off." Fred asked, "What do you mean, Mom?" Kayla continued, "Maxine brought the bird. You must have forced her. We'll get custody of our grandchild and hire the best lawyers. We'll make sure she loses her job and every penny she has." "How dare you make us look bad?" Fred said. "I'm not divorcing her, Mom. The parrot was just mimicking what it heard. It's clear you said those things, and now you see how obnoxious you are to Maxine. It was about time you knew." Kayla was shocked and turned to George, who was looking at the orchids in the garden. She yelled, "George, are you going to stand up for my dignity? Your son has been turned into a puppet by this gingerhead witch. Make sure she loses her job." George replied, "Actually, I can help with that. Maxine, would you like to join my company's sales department? You can work from home, and we'll pay you more than your current job." Kayla was furious. "What is wrong with all of you? She disrespected me and ruined my reputation." George calmly said, "Maxine gave you a wonderful gift. How you choose to handle it is up to you." George asked, "Do you think we have a strong case against Maxine?" Fred said, "I'm not sure." George then turned to me and said, "So, Maxine, what do you think of my offer?" I responded, "I would love to take up your offer, George." Kayla looked furious and kept glancing at me, George, and Fred. I had tears in my eyes, but they were tears of happiness. I asked George if I could call him Pops, like I called my own father. He hugged me, and I felt truly blessed. Meanwhile, Kayla packed her bags and threatened to go live with her maternal relatives. Fred told her that if she left, she would miss the birth of her grandchild. Kayla said she didn't care and was better off without us. To her surprise, George didn't try to stop her, and Fred was furious at her for not caring about our baby. Kayla took a cab and left. I gave birth to a healthy baby boy in February, and both George and Fred were thrilled. My mother came from the country to visit and brought homemade cookies and brownies, which George enjoyed immensely. The month was filled with happy memories as we celebrated George Jr.'s arrival. In mid-March, Kayla returned when she realized she couldn't pay her credit card bills. She made a big fuss, claiming she hadn't been informed about the birth of her grandson. Fred reminded her that she had said she didn't care about the baby before she left, so we decided to let her be. Kayla then denied ever saying she didn't care and started to cuddle the baby. George asked Kayla to apologize to me. She acted surprised and said she didn't know what she should apologize for. When George listed the things she had done wrong, Kayla reluctantly mumbled an apology. Honestly, that was more than I expected from her. I accepted Kayla's apology gladly. That night, Fred told me he plans to keep his contact with his mom to a minimum. He didn't want our child to grow up hearing negative things about us or his grandpa from Kayla, and I agreed with his reasoning. I had been worried about this but didn't want to bring it up myself because I didn't want Fred to cut off his mom just because of me. It was a relief when Fred brought it up on his own. Since December, I've been working from home for George's company. I think I've been doing a good job managing the sales department. George says I've done excellent work, but I'm not sure because he tends to hype up little things. Still, the company's sales doubled, and George was very impressed. He asked me when I could start working from the office because there's a promotion waiting for me. I thought George's offer was a joke until I joined him in the conference room. He announced that he wanted to make me a partner in the company. I was overjoyed. We've enrolled our baby boy in preschool, and things are peaceful now that Kayla is only a minor part of our lives. Life is great.